Hey there, welcome back to Reddit Dating, the best channel for Reddit cheating stories. Be sure to like, subscribe, and hit the bell notification for more stories like these. Now, let's get into the video.
I've abandoned my family, and I'm fine with it. I'm composing this from my RV outside a cafe with free internet service. I've gone over this in my head a million times, but I assumed writing it down might help me clarify my thoughts. I left my family a little more than a week after D-Day. My wife is 36 years old, I am 37 years old, and my daughter is 13 years old. It's been nearly 6 months since that day. I stumbled across her affair by chance. I was completely clueless. I thought we had a good marriage. We had a lot of intimacy, we would chat about things for hours, and we had date nights on a regular basis. We had both common and individual interests. We were in good health and fitness. Was it good? Or was it just me thinking that? My wife, let's call her Eve, cheated, thus she clearly preferred another man over me. And she couldn't possibly love me if she could betray me like that. I was thinking she was my best friend, but it turns out she wasn't. In retrospect, I can see that I was probably seeing everything through rose-colored glasses. I honestly thought my family cared about me. I thought I was adored. I guess I was the fool. I arrived home late from work because I had to attend a safety training class. She was dozing on the couch when a message with emojis appeared on her phone. Emojis like the ones I'd use if I texted her? I snooped around and discovered what had been going on for at least 5 months. I knew the AP, let's call him Adam, because he was a co-worker of hers. I'd even been to his house for a barbecue and met his family. He was married with 3 children. The youngest is only 2 years old. Something just clicked in my thoughts as I was reading the messages. It drastically altered my life. I went from adoring Eve more than anything to hating her to becoming blank when reading their letters. It's not just about her, it's about everything. I went to bed completely numb, took pictures of the messages, and didn't sleep at all, only stared at the ceiling. Eve was the next day, and I went to bed without disturbing her. She complained of neck ache as a result of lying on the couch all night. I wasn't really paying attention, I just recall thinking that everything seemed muffled, like if someone had turned down the volume on the universe. I was taken aback by how little I cared. I felt almost nothing. Shouldn't I be angry? I didn't say anything at breakfast as my wife and daughter talked. They didn't seem to notice anything out of the ordinary about me. Or even acknowledge my existence. But I wasn't feeling like myself. I felt like I was someone new, someone I didn't know or understand, dressed in the old me suit. I went through the motions of daily life, went to work, and did all the usual things. The only change is that I kind of stopped speaking. Unfortunately, I realized that no one seemed to notice. It's as though I never existed. I began to realize that Eve and my daughter did not truly love me. I was in the house with them, but they didn't really interact with me unless they needed something from me. They spoke at me rather than with me, if that makes sense. I'd experienced these agonizing aches that would come and go. They would utterly overwhelm me at times. I wasn't feeling well. I wandered around like this for 5 days before Eve asked if something was wrong during dinner. I think I only said 3 words to her and my kid during that time. I didn't even respond to her query. Instead, I made a I'm fine / don't know face and started eating. She seemed to be fine with it. I didn't go to work the next day. I work for the local power company, where I fix power lines and other things. I brought several miscellaneous items as well as my camping / hunting gear. I didn't have much of a plan. I put it in my car and drove about the neighborhood for a time, eventually ending up at the kitchen table, waiting for my wife to return home. She arrived home with a few bags of goods and began unpacking by telling me about her day. I was just sitting at the kitchen table in agony. Apart from a brief glimpse when she entered the kitchen, she didn't even look at me. Daughter came in and did the same thing. Their backs were turned to me, and they were discussing some trivial item for sale. I've never felt so rejected, undervalued, or alone in my life. I felt completely invisible, as if I weren't there or didn't deserve to be acknowledged. I was reflecting on our lives, and all I could see was that they didn't give a damn about me. They probably never did because I was just a bystander in their lives. They didn't care about me. I was a useful and convenient prop. I was hit with a wave of anguish, cried, but they didn't care, so I became enraged, very enraged. I rose up, grabbed a glass of water, and threw it hard at the tiles over the sink. It just blew up, and glass fragments showered down on everything. They both whirled around, furious what the H. When they saw my distorted tear-soaked face, they froze, unsure what to do. It was awkwardly quiet for a long time before I spoke. Eve, I know everything about your infidelity with Adam. I was astonished at how clear it came out because I was clenching my jaw so tightly that it hurt. What? My daughter asked Eve. Is that correct, Mom? Eve began to try to explain. She gave me a short glance and replied, sorry, I can explain. Then she returned her attention to our daughter, and they began squabbling. It was like if I was invisible or something. Hello. Here comes the glass thrower. After a few minutes of observing their increasingly heated disagreement, I simply walked out and into my car, looking out the window at them as they continued to argue in the kitchen. They had no idea I had left. I remained there for a few more minutes before giving up and driving away. Eve tried to phone me after about 15 minutes, then call after call after call, then a deluge of texts from both of them. I simply ignored it and ultimately shut off the phone. The following day, I took half of our money and called my supervisor. I told him I wasn't sure when I'd be returning. He told me I'd be fired if I didn't show up. I simply said okay and hung up. I simply didn't care. When I arrived at Adam's residence, his wife opened the door. I handed her a copy of the mails and told her about Adam and my wife's activities. I left her sobbing on the stairwell. At the end of the day, I found myself at a small hotel on the outskirts of town. The next few days were a jumble as I tried to make sense of everything. I didn't make any significant progress. I was mostly staring at the wall, trying to come up with excuses not to commit suicide. Eve's older brother is a police officer. We'll call him Bob. I'm not sure if Bob arrived on the third or fourth day. I'm not sure how he found me. He attempted to question me, but I remained silent. When I didn't respond, he informed me that I was under arrest and placed me in handcuffs. However, he did not take me to the station as I had anticipated. Instead, he drove me home. Bob pulled me into the living room, where my wife and daughter began berating me right away. Still, I remained silent. I just sat there in awe as they told me how bad this was for them. When I was a nasty a-hole for making them worry. It carried on for a bit until Eve yelled at me, say something. I looked at her for a moment before saying quietly, I don't have anything to say to you. Bob became enraged and shoved me against the wall, screaming at me not to speak to his sister in that manner. Bob's furious reaction gave me a lot of delight. I'm not sure why, but it made me so joyful that I burst out laughing. Bob's wife had left him 4 months before. I gave Bob a friendly smile. Bob, you're pathetic. Did you beat up on Bob's wife? Is that why she abandoned you? Bob slammed into me and knocked me out. Wife and daughter began screaming in unison. As I stood up, I couldn't stop laughing. I couldn't stop myself. I was bleeding from someplace on the floor when I noticed it. I'm still handcuffed and giggling. Perhaps it was the ridiculousness of it all? I spit blood in Bob's face and exclaimed, "You, Bob." He punched me again, this time hard enough to put me out cold. In the hospital, I awoke. When I opened my eyes, I puked all over the floor, so I knew I'd suffered a concussion. Eve, Bob, and my daughter were present, and they were speaking to me in a way that I couldn't understand. They were ordered to leave by a nurse who emerged. She gave me a pan to puke in and summoned someone to clean up. I told her that my family had brought me here, and that they were not to come close me while she was taking my pulse. That if they came back into the room, I would leave and run. She argued vehemently that running or simply standing up was a bad idea for me. She would, however, speak with security. It was wonderful not to see them again in the hospital. I could finally think, and I felt a little better. I considered reporting Bob in order to get him fired, but it's a small town. His co-workers would most likely cover for him. I pondered addressing my wife, but it also didn't make sense to me. I chose to vanish, to become a ghost, since I didn't want to see these individuals again. I wrote each of them a letter and warned Bob that if he troubled me again, I would report him. I informed my daughter that Eve had deceived me, and that she would no longer have a father. I wrote a lengthy letter to Eve. I made an effort to be as practical as feasible. I told her I was going to sell the house, that I wouldn't be paying the mortgage or utilities any longer, and so on. I told her that reconciliation, or even contact, was out of the question, especially since she had sent her brother to drag me back and beat me senseless in front of them. I emphasized that I will never do anything for her again, so if she wants a divorce, she must organize it herself. I told her I was going to vanish and didn't want to be discovered. That if she interferes with my life again, I will commit suicide. That we'll never talk again. I concluded by expressing how much she had hurt me. I really regret saying that final phrase to her. It's as if I let her steal a little more of me, as if I let her cause me a little more agony. In the hospital, I devised a plan to vanish, and Eve gave the hospital some new clothes, which they forwarded to me. Then one evening, I simply exited the rear fire escape. I set off some type of alarm and panicked a little, but happily no one stopped me. I returned to the motel to retrieve my car. I exchanged it for a modest RV and took off. I recently purchased a new phone. My father was the only person I called. I told him everything and warned him that if he provided my new phone number to anyone, I would be completely unavailable for the rest of my life. He could phone me if he wanted to reach me in order for me to sign something. Aside from that, I just wanted to be alone. I grieved the loss of my former life for the first several months, but I soon realized that I was grieving the death of a fantasy. A memory that lived solely in my thoughts. The devoted wife and daughter, the family, the friends. It was all a figment of my imagination. These people never genuinely cared about me. Over time, I began to recreate some semblance of a life. Only this time I was completely invisible. I ghosted the entire society. Now I'm just a box. To store valuables and cash, I hire a safe deposit box. For money, I do odd things. I go hunting, fishing, and scavenging. My money expenditure is minor, hence my cash reserves are increasing. I don't have a bank account and I don't pay taxes. When people ask what my name is, I say Fred. This is not my name. I go out of my way not to contribute to society or anything else. I am still invisible, like I was in my family, but at least to strangers. Not those who claim to adore me. To be honest, I kind of like it now. I make my own beer, I travel, and I have no obligations. I work whenever it is convenient for me. I spend a lot of time relaxing in nature. I go hunting and fishing with a few companions. I am in fantastic shape, in fact, I am in the finest shape of my life. Overall, my life is improving. At the very least, no one is manipulating me for their own gain while appearing to care about me. I have no idea what happened to my wife and daughter, old acquaintances, or the rest of the family. I'm not sure if I'm divorced or owing child support. I have no idea what happened to the house. I'm not particularly bothered. My father has tried to offer me information a few times, but I have always turned him down. He is the only person from my previous life with whom I periodically communicate. I feel liberated, relaxed, pleased, and even delighted. I don't have much, but I don't require much either. When I reach the end of the line, I will sell everything and burn the remaining funds. I'll make certain that there is nothing of worth left to remember me by. Then I'll walk into a national park without anyone knowing and vanish for good. I like to go to retail malls, railway stations, and bus stops and just observe people. There they are, all the men who used to be like me. Men who sacrifice themselves for a society and families who don't care about them, men who work themselves to death with no acknowledgement or gratitude from anyone. They are constantly guilt-tripped, pressed, and urged to do more and sacrifice more. More and more meaningless rubbish, designer clothes, a bigger house, more of this and more of that. Never received a thank you, no expression of gratitude or appreciation. In most situations, there isn't even a smile. They try to deceive themselves, just like I did, by refusing to accept reality. But I see it in them, just like I used to, and they know it deep down. I'm familiar with their vacuous million-mile stare. I used to have one like it. Thank you for listening. It was good to get this off my chest.